The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow across the sleek conference room table. Richard's face was tight with controlled anger as he leaned forward, his knuckles white against the polished surface. "Either work weekends or—" "Hi, you're fired," he said, each word like a stone dropping into still water. I studied his face, the man I'd reported to for 7 years, and recognized something I'd never seen before. This wasn't about weekend work. This was about something else entirely. "I can't do that, Richard. My daughter has her recital on Saturdays, and Sundays are our family days. I've never missed deadlines, and my team consistently delivers above expectations. Working weekends isn't necessary." The clock on the wall ticked 11 times before he responded. I counted each click. "Clean out your desk. You're terminated. Effective immediately." A strange calm settled over me. Not the numbness of shock, but the clarity of a moment long anticipated. I nodded once, maintaining eye contact. "I understand." Richard expected protest, anger, perhaps even begging. The slight twitch at the corner of his eye revealed his surprise. At my composure, he'd prepared for a fight that wasn't coming. I stood, straightened my jacket and walked to my office. The building seemed suddenly foreign, as if I were seeing it through a different lens. 7 years of dedication reduced to a 15-minute conversation. My office held remnants of nearly a decade: project awards, family photos, the small cactus my daughter had given me that had somehow survived the fluorescent environment. I placed them methodically into a cardboard box while my computer monitor glowed expectantly. Before anyone could escort me out or restrict my access, I connected my external drive and began downloading my personal work files, project templates I'd created, research documents I'd compiled on my own time, reference materials I'd organized. Nothing proprietary, nothing that didn't belong to me. Lisa from accounting passed by my door, noticed the box and stopped short. "Michael, what's happening?" "Just a career adjustment," I replied, offering a small smile that felt strange on my face. As the progress bar filled on my screen, I glanced at the framed photo of my daughter. In it, she was missing her front teeth, grinning wildly on a carousel. That smile was worth more than any corner office. The download completed with a soft chime. I disconnected the drive, placed it in my pocket, and lifted the box. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even disappointed. As I walked through the office one last time, nodding goodbye to confused colleagues, a peculiar sense of purpose settled in my chest. Richard had made a mistake, but I hadn't yet realized just how significant that mistake would be. I didn't slam doors, I didn't curse his name. I simply drove home in the middle of a Friday afternoon, the weight of unscheduled freedom pressing against my shoulders. This wasn't about revenge, this was about what would happen next. The earliest memory I have of Vertex Technologies is my interview with Richard. He was different then, hungry but principled, ambitious but grounded. We connected over a shared vision of technology that served people rather than replacing them. "I need someone who can build systems that last," he'd said, sliding my resume across his desk. "Someone who understands that code is just a tool, not the solution itself." I'd nodded, eager and genuine. "The best systems are invisible. They just work." He'd hired me on the spot. For years, we were a formidable team. I built the project management infrastructure that helped the company grow from 30 employees to over 300. Richard climbed the ranks to vice president of operations, bringing me up with him to senior project director. My team respected me. I made sure they had resources, protection from office politics, and recognition for their achievements. We delivered consistently, built a reputation for reliability, and became the go-to division for high-priority client projects. 3 years in, I met Sarah at a company holiday party. She worked in legal compliance, had a laugh that carried across crowded rooms and challenged everything I thought I knew about work-life balance. 6 months later, we were married. A year after that, Emma was born. Tiny fingers and searching eyes that redefined my understanding of what mattered. The first subtle shift with Richard came during my paternity leave. I'd taken the full 4 weeks the company offered, a benefit Richard had actually championed, but when I returned, something had changed. Small comments about dedication, pointed questions about my availability, Subtle exclusions from after-hours strategy meetings. I adapted, working smarter rather than longer. Created systems that allowed me to be fully present during work hours and fully present with my family afterward. My performance metrics never suffered. The second shift came when Vertex secured the Meridian contract, a massive government infrastructure project worth 8 figures annually. Richard assembled a specialized team, placing me at its head despite his growing coolness toward me. "I need your obsessive attention to detail on this one," he'd said, not quite meeting my eyes. At the time, I'd taken it as a compliment. The Meridian. Specifications were labyrinthine, the compliance requirements exhaustive. I noticed discrepancies in the financial projections Richard provided compared to what we were actually building, but when I raised concerns, he dismissed them. "Finance handles the money, you handle the execution. Stay in your lane, Michael." That should have been my warning. In retrospect, the signs accumulated like raindrops before a flood. Richard's closed-door meetings with Gregory from accounting and Vince from sales, both recent hires who'd worked with Richard at his previous company. The rushed approvals for change orders that significantly increased project costs without proportional changes in deliverables. The new reporting structure that bypassed normal audit protocols for the Meridian account. I noticed but didn't connect the dots. Not until that Friday afternoon when Richard decided I was a liability rather than an asset. At home, Emma ran to me at the front door, surprised and delighted to see her father home early. Sarah's expression shifted from happy to concerned as she noticed the box in my arms. "Daddy, you're home for movie night." Emma wrapped her arms around my legs. I set down the box and lifted her up, breathing in the scent of apple shampoo and childhood. "I am, and not just tonight." Sarah's eyes asked the question. "Richard fired me for refusing to work weekends." I explained, the words feeling strange in my mouth. I expected to feel shame, anger, fear. Instead, as I held my daughter and looked at my wife, I felt oddly unburdened. The evening unfolded with pizza and princess movies, Emma nestled between us, on the couch, unaware that anything had changed. Later, after Emma was asleep, I set up my laptop on the kitchen table to organize my files and update my resume. That's when I found them, the emails I was never meant to see. The first email opened by accident. It had been misfiled in a shared project folder, addressed from Richard to Gregory and Vince with the subject line, "Meridian Adjustments, Private." My finger hesitated over the mouse. Corporate ethics and personal integrity battled briefly before curiosity won. I opened it, the screen filled with words that turned my stomach cold. The Meridian invoicing structure allows for a 12% markup on all specialized consultation services. We'll route these through Pinnacle as discussed and split the difference. Michael's team budget projections are consistently under by 8 to 10%, which gives us additional cushion. Once the Q3 milestone payment clears, we'll have approximately 1.4 matters to distribute. I sat motionless, the blue light from my screen illuminating the dark kitchen. This wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. Pinnacle Consulting was an entity I'd never heard of in relation to our project. A dull buzz filled my ears as I searched through my downloaded files, finding more buried communications, an offshore account in the Caymans, falsified expertise claims to justify inflated rates, fabricated documentation for services never rendered. The magnitude crystallized slowly. Richard, Gregory, and Vince were systematically defrauding both Vertex and the government, skimming millions from the Meridian contract, and my meticulous documentation and questioning had become a threat. My hands trembled slightly as I closed the laptop. The house creaked and settled around me. My family, sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that everything had changed. I made myself a cup of tea, watching steam rise in the darkness. My options arranged themselves in my mind like chess pieces. I could go to Richard's boss with the evidence, but senior management might be involved. I could contact Meridian directly, but without understanding the full scope of the fraud, I might not be believed. I could walk away, find another job, pretend I never saw the emails. The safest option for my family, perhaps, but one my conscience couldn't tolerate. The tea grew cold as I weighed possibilities. By midnight, a plan had taken shape. not born of anger or vengeance, but of a calm determination to set things right. Next morning, I created a secure email account using a VPN. I organized the evidence methodically, creating a timeline of suspicious activities, cross-referencing financial discrepancies with project milestones. The work was familiar, the same, structured approach I'd applied to projects for years. I called an old college friend who had become a corporate attorney specializing in whistleblower cases. "Don't use your regular phone or email for anything related to this," he advised after I explained the situation without naming names. "Document everything, but be smart about what evidence you gather and how." On Monday morning, while Sarah was at work and Emma at school, I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over and used their Wi-Fi to access public records. Pinnacle Consulting existed on paper only, registered 6 months after the Meridian contract was signed, with a business address that turned out to be a virtual office service. I wasn't acting out of anger. I was gathering facts, building a case, as methodically as I'd build a project plan. Each revelation should have shocked me, but instead confirmed what I already suspected. The weekend ultimatum had nothing to do with dedication and everything to do with removing a potential witness. "Dad, are you looking for a new job?" Emma asked that evening, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by notes. I closed my notebook and pulled her onto my lap. "Not exactly. I'm solving a puzzle." "Is it a hard one?" "Yes," I said, kissing the top of her head, "but I'm good at puzzles." By Wednesday, I had enough. Not just suspicions or fragments, but a comprehensive documentation of what appeared to be years of systematic fraud. I made 3 identical packages with USB drives and printed summaries. One for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, one for Vertex's Board of Directors, and one for Janice Williamson, the Chief Compliance Officer at Vertex, the only senior executive I truly trusted. I didn't use my name. The evidence would speak for itself. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking balance. The glass and steel Vertex building looked different as I approached it the following Monday, no longer my workplace but a crime scene of sorts. The security guard at the front desk recognized me, confusion crossing his. "Face, Mr. Parker. Didn't you—" "I have an appointment with Janice Williamson," I said, maintaining eye contact. Janice met me in the lobby, her normally composed face lined with tension. She led me not to her office, but to a small conference room I'd never seen before. "The board received your package," she said without preamble once the door closed behind us. "As did I. Is there anything you didn't include that I should know?" I studied her face, looking for signs of complicity or deception. I found only exhaustion and resolve. Everything relevant is there. "I have backups if needed," she nodded once. "The FBI contacted our legal department this morning. Richard, Gregory, and Vince have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." A tightness in my chest I hadn't acknowledged began to release. "Was anyone else involved?" I asked. "We're still determining that. The fraud appears to have been carefully contained to those 3, but the investigation is ongoing." She paused. "The board would like to speak with you." The board meeting was brief and focused. 8 men and women in expensive suits listened. As I walked them through the evidence, interrupting occasionally with sharp questions. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" asked Thomas Reed, the chairman. "I didn't know sooner," I replied simply. "When I found discrepancies and raised concerns to Richard, I was told to focus on execution, not financials. It wasn't until after my termination that I discovered the emails confirming what was happening." "And why were you terminated?" The question came from Elise Chen, head of the audit committee. Officially for refusing to work weekends. Unofficially, I believe it was because my documentation practices and questions were becoming problematic for their scheme. By Thursday, the story broke in the financial press. Vertex Technologies executive suspended amid fraud investigation. By Friday, Richard, Gregory, and Vince had been arrested, led from the building in a scene I didn't witness but heard about from former colleagues who called to express shock and ask questions I couldn't answer. The following week, Thomas Reed called me personally. "We'd like you to return, Michael. With a promotion and appropriate compensation adjustment, of course. Your position would report directly to the COO. I thanked him for the offer, but declined. May I ask why? Genuine surprise colored his voice. I've started something new, I told him, something I believe in. What I didn't tell him was that on the same day I'd prepared the evidence packages, I'd also registered my own consulting firm, Transparent Systems, dedicated to helping companies establish ethical project management frameworks and detect potential fraud before it took root. 2 former clients had already signed contracts. Word was spreading. The criminal proceedings against Richard and his accomplices would take months, perhaps years. I provided testimony where required, but otherwise kept my distance. I didn't attend the arraignment. I didn't speak to journalists. When Richard's wife reached out sobbing, asking if I could tell her what happened, I directed her gently to the public records. This wasn't about witnessing their fall. It was about rebuilding what mattered. The mountain cabin creaked softly as wind swept down from the peaks, carrying the first hint of autumn. Through the window I watched Emma and Sarah exploring the forest edge, gathering pine cones and fallen leaves, their laughter carrying across the clearing. 1 year had passed since Richard had glared at me across that conference table. 1 year since my life had changed course. Transparent Systems now employed 7 people, all working remotely, all dedicated to the same mission. We'd helped 3 companies identify and address internal fraud. We'd helped a dozen more implement systems that made such fraud nearly impossible. I hadn't spoken Richard's name in months. Last I'd heard, he'd taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against larger players in exchange for a reduced sentence. The investigation had expanded beyond Vertex, implicating procurement officers at Meridian itself. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call, a potential new client referred by Janice, who had become a quiet advocate for my new venture. Do you need to take that? Sarah called from outside. Emma balanced on her shoulders, reaching for a low-hanging branch. It can wait, I replied, closing the laptop and joining them in the dappled sunlight. Later that evening, as we roasted marshmallows over a small fire pit, Emma looked up at me with sticky fingers and chocolate-smeared cheeks. Dad, are you happy? You don't work at your old job anymore. I considered the question carefully, watching the flames dance. Yes, I said finally. I am. Because you don't have to work weekends? Her 6-year-old logic made Sarah smile. Partly, I admitted, but mostly because I found something better to do. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and I sat on the cabin's porch watching stars emerge in the mountain sky. Her hand found mine in the darkness. You never told me if you were afraid, she said. When you sent those packages, I thought about it. Not afraid exactly. Determined, she nodded, understanding more than I said. The next morning, an email arrived from a former Vertex employee now working at a tech startup. Suspicious patterns in our billing system, the subject line read, could use your expertise. As I drafted my response, I glanced at the family photo on my desk, the 3 of us by a lake, faces sun-kissed and smiling. Next to it sat a small cactus, somehow still alive, transplanted from my old office to my new reality. I wasn't seeking revenge when I exposed Richard's fraud. I was seeking something else entirely. A world where doing the right thing mattered more than weekend work, where systems served people rather than trapping them, where my daughter could grow up seeing that integrity wasn't just a word but a choice made daily. The bitter taste of that Friday afternoon had long since faded, replaced by something unexpected, gratitude. Richard's ultimatum had freed me from a path I hadn't realized was constraining me. I wasn't the only one who had witnessed corruption in that gleaming office tower, but I was the one who didn't stay quiet.